Okay, so this tutorial is going to be about moving basically a tile sprite or an unanimated sprite that can be repeated. So something like a wall or a ground texture from Piskel into Scratch, and then using that to build sort of either the walls or the structure of your game. So I've got this one pre-built. This is a ground texture, but it's also can be used for a basic like stone wall texture. Which is what we're going to use it for in this tutorial. So I'm going to click on Edit, and you'll notice it's only a single frame, right? It has no animation to it. It's just a little, I think it's a 32 by 32 tile that repeats. So if I go to Settings or Preferences, I go to Tile Mode, turn that on, zoom out, you can see it creates this really nice ground texture. But I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to go to Export, which is the little mountain with the sun. I'm going to choose the PNG. I'm going to leave the scale at about 4 times. I could actually go at like 6 times, but whatever. And then down at the bottom, I'm going to do Selected Frame Export. So this is what works best if you need something that's just a single static image. This isn't for if you're doing animated GIF files or animations in Scratch. So I click Download, and it will go to my Downloads folder. Now, if you're using a Chromebook, most of your Chromebooks are set up in such a way that when you click Download, whatever you've downloaded is moved automatically to your main Google Drive folder. But in my case, mine goes to my actual Downloads folder on the Mac. So if I go back to Scratch, I've got my level here. So in this example, I've got my level 2. I've basically blocked it out using straight black lines, which is a really useful way of doing it because this allows you to see how the level will look before you start putting all the effort into actually designing sprites and really cleaning it up. This is basically like your napkin sketch of your level. So what you do is under Costumes, you go over to the Choose a Costume. This is kind of a multi-step process. You go to Choose a Costume, and then you choose Upload Costume. Then you go to the folder. In my case, mine is in my Downloads folders. Yours will be in your Google Drive folder. And here is the ground texture PNG. And I click Open. Okay. You'll notice I just have a big ground texture. Here is the really, really important part of this, though. If you go down to the bottom here, you'll see a little blue button that says Convert to Vector. You have to click that button. If you don't click that button, none of this other stuff works. So you convert it to vector. And what that does is that turns this PNG you've uploaded into an object by itself. So now I can select my selection tool here and I can click on it, and you can see that I can move it as a single object on the plane. It's got a bounding box around it. I can rotate it. I can resize it. So you have to change it to a vector object. That also goes for the level that you are in. Needs to be a vector level as well. You can tell it's a vector level if it says convert to bitmap, because it's always telling you to convert to the other version. So if we go to ground texture, we select it, and we're just going to hit Control C, then go back to our level and hit Control V. Now, because it's a vector object, I can resize it by clicking on the corner nodes and just dragging. Let's zoom in here a little bit because we need it to be a little smaller, right? We're going to really create... this is probably, like in retrospect, like if I were using this block in an actual game and it was going to be this big in game, I wouldn't have nearly this much detail. I'd probably make a very basic, like 16 by 16 block to fulfill this function. But what I can do is move it right here over my wall, and then I can either copy it by clicking on the copy button and then pasting a new one, which is fine, but not particularly efficient. What I can do is I can select it and then hold down Alt and then click and drag to the side to create a duplicate. If I'm also holding down Shift while I do that, it will move on a perfectly horizontal plane. Then I can just, once again, release, hold down Alt, Shift, click and drag, Alt, Shift, and drag it over. You notice I get this nice repeating pattern here. It's okay if it's not perfect. But if I also can take these and turn them into larger blocks. So if I select one and hold down Shift and click on these other ones like this, so they're all selected, I can click on the Group button, which is right up here in the top. If I do that, now this is a single object, which I can then hold down Alt and click and drag to create multiples of, right? So zoom out, all of a sudden I can just grab this, put that there, take this one, put it up here, and then Alt, click and drag. Maybe I want a larger one, so I hold on Shift, select those two, group those ones, and I begin to be able to create all the walls and various aspects for my game. I often find it's helpful to have a couple different versions. If you ever want to just select one, you can always hit the ungroup, so you can select one. And we can make a vertical version of this as well, just by clicking Alt and then dragging them down. Or just doing a copy and paste, which works as well. So let's just make one that's like 3 tall, group it, and now I can drag it over here. I can drag one over here, right? And you can see how as I do that, now I have a better looking and a little bit more custom designed walls for my maze. Now, I would just continue basically doing this until I had filled in over all the areas that I had roughed in with the initial line work. And that's how you take a Piskel tile and turn that into your level design. Now, obviously, you are not restricted to a single tile that you can add here, right? So I have another costume here. This one's more of a wall. I could take this one as well and then start adding it in other places and doing that same duplicate function. You know, maybe right here, like I wanted to have a tile that looked more like this. Now I wouldn't, because these aren't actually designed to work together as a tile set. Well, they are, but this other one is actually more useful as a ground texture. But for this example, works just as well. So you can have all sorts of different sprites that you add into your level costume to add detail and to add dimension to it, right? And really, the only limit is how much time you want to spend on it. Now, I still do have these two costumes, the tile or the wall costume and the ground texture costume. Once I'm done copy and pasting them in, I just delete them because I don't need them anymore. And then I can just continue with the objects I have in here. So that's how I'd go about doing this. It's the easiest way. Scratch is not great. I don't know why they don't have an align button. But you can, if you're trying to fine tune them as far as like their alignment, I'd recommend using the arrow keys because it will move them in small sort of like increments, and you can line things up pretty decently like that. But I do recommend the technique where you take the sprite, you hold down Option, start dragging it, and then hold down Shift to keep it exactly in line. Because then you can get these really nice tile patterns. And if you happen to have a little gap, you can just use the arrow key to drop it over one, one more. It'll move it basically by 1x value, so you can get it to line up really nicely. So you can see here I have a nice sort of floor texture showing up. So that's how you do. That's how you bring in your own Piskels to design your level.